Thank goodness this season's nearly done, eh? Because I am so sick to death of talking about horrendous referee decisions. This is today's Arsenal Raw Reaction Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Raw Reaction Show. Joining you the morning after the day before. A very long day. It was up about 6:30 yesterday. Train then from where I live into London. It's only a short amount of time these days. But then, a 3-hour train up to Liverpool, which was cancelled. Obviously, because whenever you try and go anywhere above London these days, you find your trains are cancelled. And they chucked us off a train because the brake was stuck, chucked us onto another train that was meant to go to Birmingham. They then moved the people on that Birmingham train onto another train and gave us that Birmingham train. It didn't go to Birmingham anymore. It straight up to London, straight up to Liverpool, sorry. And then, of course, after the game, came all the way back home again in one day. So, yeah, it was a long one, about 15 hours, I think, in the end. 15-hour day, so quite long of work. But and made worse, of course, by what we witnessed in the most uncomfortable press box in the Premier League, which, of course, will no longer be a thing because Everton are leaving Goodison Park and joining somewhere else next season. Yeah, I'm not going to miss Goodison Park. I'm going to be very honest. I'm not going to miss it at all. It's not a great away experience. It's not a particularly great place for Arsenal. Our records there are pretty dreadful. And overall, I think, I'm happy that they're moving into a more modern day stadium. But let's talk all about the game a little bit more after you guys and girls. But thank you so much to you all. Really appreciate you being here. Matt, Glenn, we've got Shanor, we've got Knowledge, we've got Aaron, we've got Franklin, we've got Barry T and Stevie and Paul and Lars, Paul Jr. and Sean, Carlton. We've got Bakary Lasagna, we've got Steve, we've got Granddaddy Gooner, we've got Alawale and Zoom and Shari and Carrie Ann. Thank you to you all for being here. Really appreciate you being here indeed. It is very much appreciated. And we're going to talk about yesterday's game and plenty more as we go throughout today's show. So drop a like, subscribe if you're new, and all that usual YouTube-y stuff. Not a great game. But in the end, it wasn't necessarily our fault, is the way I've kind of summed up yesterday. It wasn't particularly great. Arsenal were by far the more dominant side, as we've come to expect. We limited Everton to, nothing, really. Everton really didn't have anything. The only time they ever got kind of close to Arsenal's goal was with the penalty that we'll obviously come on to talk about. But overall, Arsenal had 14 shots to Everton's 5, 71% possession. To Everton's 29, 459 passes to Everton's 189, 86 pass accuracy to Everton's 68. But 13 fouls by Arsenal players, 17 fouls by Everton players, 30 fouls overall is just not a nice game. You can usually see what type of game has been played just by looking at the number of fouls there are in games. So to have 30 fouls, on average, a foul every 3 minutes, which is just nuts, isn't it? That's absolutely ridiculous to have a foul every 3 minutes in the game. And Arsenal, of course, made some quite significant changes. I think they made more changes than we all expected. I certainly, in my preview, and I hope you enjoyed the effort that went into putting on a show for you yesterday, despite me not being able to do it live as usual. But myself and Tops had a chat about kind of the season in general and looked ahead to yesterday's game against Everton as well. And the key kind of theme was about how we rotate, who we rest, who starts. And there was more rotation than I thought there would be, actually, because Jorginho came into the midfield. Thomas Partey didn't play a single minute. Ødegaard was rested. Saka was rested. Martinelli was rested. Timber was rested. And we played a back four of White, Saliba, Kivior, and Lewis Skelly. Not sure who is going to be, of course, in that back line for Real Madrid. We'll talk more about that in tomorrow morning's show, and of course on Tuesday as well, and we'll do our main preview for that game against Real Madrid on Tuesday night. But this indeed is the lineup for the game, and I think it shows you what rotation is possible. But we've talked about rotation in this team. We've talked about Arteta needing to rest some players, take some players out of the spotlight. But when you do rotate quite heavily, obviously it does kind of limit your output. And in games previous this season, where we've kind of been battering them for not rotating enough, well, when you do rotate, it does obviously have an impact on the game and on our output. And that's why perhaps there is this temptation to not rotate as much so that we can be at our best for as much as feasibly possible. Now, I do want to point out that in the 9th minute, there was an absolutely fantastic applause all around the ground to remember our good friend, Super Kevin Campbell. Those that are long-time listeners to the channel and long-time Arsenal fans, of course, will know all about Kev. And the amount of times, numerous occasions he joined us for shows. Numerous times he joined Sophie, of course, over on the Highbury squad, and was a friend and brilliant human being. And it was great to see a kind of a coming together of supporters. Even in the few minutes before the 9th minute, Arsenal fans were singing Kev's name. It was quite emotional. As someone who's would have considered themselves quite a good mate of Kev's. It was very emotional indeed, and certainly was great I managed to catch up with one of his good friends, Gary King, who was on the pitch at the Emirates the other day and was up there in Everton. We shared the train up together and had some great stories to talk about Kev as well, and just in general also. So it was a really good day, despite the result not being what we ultimately would have like to have seen, of course. But Arsenal, I don't know why I haven't changed the caption. Arsenal managed to get their goal through an unlikely combination, actually, on the day, because Leandro Trossard gave Arsenal the lead in the game because of a transition in the end, a turnover in play. And it came courtesy of a run by Raheem Sterling, who then, of course, managed to set up Leandro Trossard for the goal, which, of course, came at a really good time. The game was kind of petering towards half-time, and getting that goal when we managed to get it was, I think, very, very important indeed. So, yes, Trossard managed to give us the lead. Good finish. He'd missed an opportunity earlier in the game. There was a great ball over the top from Kivior that Trossard took a little bit of too extra touch, and heavy touch was his last one as well. But this was a particularly classic Trossard clinical finish with his left foot. Some people kind of pointing fingers at the goalkeeper, Jordan Pickford. But for my money, I think that Trossard made it next to impossible for Pickford to have any kind of touch on the ball whatsoever. So really good finish by Trossard. It gives Arteta, of course, a bit of a conversation about who starts on that left-hand side. Martinelli came on in the second half, was energetic, did have a chance, forced Jordan Pickford into a save himself. And there is a lot more, I think. I think there's more danger about Martinelli in general, but Trossard continues to be one of our better finishers when given those opportunities. So, yeah, I think there's a real toss-up between those two as to who should and will start, of course, in that game against Real Madrid on Tuesday. So that's one to look out for. But Arsenal went into the break with that 1-0 lead, looking, of course, then to consolidate that and trying to build on that in the second half. And at the beginning of the second half, we saw Saka and Martinelli come on for Sterling and Nwaneri. And when you see those changes, you're like, well, surely Arsenal now are going to take this a step forwards, aren't they? Surely Arsenal are going to go to the next level when it comes to their performance and their output because of who, of course, came off the bench. But that was anything but the case because Leandro Trossard moving in around that centre-forward position and Saka to his right, Martinelli to his left, it really didn't offer too much. And instead, at the beginning of the second half, Arsenal gave away a penalty, although the penalty that was given away has to be one of the worst. One of the worst. And I feel like I've said those words in that particular order so many times this season. I've seen... How many times have I had to say this is one of the worst decisions I have ever seen? It's not a penalty. If this is a penalty, the game is pointless. The game is pointless. Does Miles Lewis-Skelly do particularly well here? No. Does he foul Harrison? No. Not in the box, at least. Certainly. Maybe outside. maybe an absolute push, maybe. But even then, you're clutching at straws for me. But there's no contact that continues into the box besides Lewis Skelly falling over. Um, Harrison goes down and buys the penalty from Darren Ingley. Probably would be better again. Maybe if it was other referees who wouldn't give this, maybe he would have been better trying to take the shot on. But he cowardly pulls out of that opportunity and tries to bait a referee who, frankly, was giving fouls left, right, and centre. So I'm not surprised that Darren England gave it. It was a horrendous, one of the worst refereeing performances overall. Stop, start. I felt for Everton at times. It wasn't particularly like he was against Arsenal, because I felt for Everton in moments at some of the decisions that were being made by Darren England. But just, it wasn't like I felt like there was any bias against Arsenal. I'm not sitting here and saying that. I'm purely saying in this particular instance, he's just a terrible referee that gave terrible decisions throughout the game. I don't think that I don't think this is about Arsenal. I don't think this is about an anti-Miles Lewis Skelly agenda for me. I think there certainly is cases we can talk about in other games where that has been the case. But this particular referee in this particular game is just crap. Was just terrible. It was an awful refereeing performance. As I say, if you spoke to any Everton fans after the game, they would tell you how frustrated they were with Darren England's performance from that side of things. So we can't sit here and talk about biases and stuff like that. I don't think there is a particular bias in this game overall, but it was just a terrible, 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 terrible decision. And he was, of course, I think on the VAR when Miles Lewis Skelly got sent off at Wolves when Michael Oliver sent him off, and it went to VAR, and VAR deemed that a red card offence. Yeah, we can have the broader conversation about our misfortune with referees and obviously the theme that promotes, and we've talked about that at length. I'm kind of bored of it, really. It's draining, it's demoralising. I was having conversations on the way up to the game with a couple of Arsenal fans talking about how we were kind of just checked out of football in a way because it's become the product is so rubbish. The product is horrendous. Look, the product is just so boring because the referees are so rubbish. And it's just so demoralizing having to sit back and watch these games over and over and over and over and over again with these horrible decisions that are made one way in one game and another way in another game. And just the quality of the product is just horrendous. How can we call ourselves the best league in the world when you've got this being given? And I think Arsenal, go on to win this game either comfortably with a 1-0 or go on to win maybe with a couple extra. But Everton, of course, would be more open. They'd have to go and try and chase the game a bit more because they're a goal down, but they didn't have to because they're very happy to take a point from this game where Everton, their season's done. Just getting a good result here in front of their home fans was obviously what was really, really important to them. So it changed the dynamic of the game, the penalty, and it changed the way that Everton were going to approach the second half. We got that really important goal that we deserved in the first half, and that was obviously you get that goal, it's tactically going to open up the opposition. And I assume that would have been what all of the discussion at halftime would have been about. It's nuts. Morgie says, Tom, not wishing to pour petrol on your flames, but I think we would have been howling for a penalty if the roles were reversed. I'm certainly not for me, Morgie. No, I do not want penalties given for this. I do not want penalties given for this whatsoever. For Arsenal against Arsenal, this isn't a penalty. This is not a penalty at all. I don't want to see anybody given a penalty for something like this. Horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. And then, the second half kind of played out. We had more dominance. We had more opportunities. We had Saka had a free kick that hit the wall. Rice had a free kick that was stung the hands of Pickford. Trossard had a shot parried over the bar but fouled in the process. Martinelli had a shot that was parried. Marino had a header at the end that he probably should have put on target at the very least. So we had, plenty of opportunities in the game, but it's a bit of a story of the season, isn't it? That we create chances, but sadly we just don't seem to take them. And then at the end of the game, Darren England blows up for full time before full time to the frustration of both sets of players. Um, if you could ever have an example of just quite how bad these officials are, they can't even keep track of the time. The very basic understanding of the game, of how long it needs to play for. You're given a certain amount of added time, and you can't even stick to it. The awful thing is that he gave Everton a free kick because he had to give something because he blowed his whistle. I don't know what Trossard was doing, by the way. He kind of kicked like thin air as just like I don't know, maybe he was trying to bluff or something. I don't know. But Darren England then gives a free kick to Everton. What can you say about that? There's not much more to say about the game. It was dull. It was boring. It was poor. It wasn't great. It was, Arsenal was certainly the better team, but it's just, it just wasn't great. So let's go to part 2, I guess, and just kind of tackle some of your feelings. I feel that this is kind of the mood around Premier League games between now and the end of the season. Of course, Nottingham Forest lost their game against Villa, which means that actually Arsenal's draw helped open up a larger gap to third place. Ironically, despite the fact that we didn't win and it wasn't a great result, we managed to open up a 5-point gap to Nottingham Forest because they lost against Aston Villa. The top 4 race is really, really interesting. Arsenal aren't in that race. They're 10 points ahead of Chelsea in that race for top 4. But it's a really interesting race because you've got Brighton in 8th on 47 points. I don't think Bournemouth are in it anymore after their form. They're winless in 5. They've lost and drawn and lost and lost and drawn. If they had managed to turn those losses into draws and those draws into wins, so let's say 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If they had 7 extra points from those 5 games, just those losses into draws and those 2 draws into wins, they'd be sitting and talking about a 52-point moment where they'd be joint with Chelsea. That's how close it is. That's how a bad run can affect your season. Bournemouth have hit some really bad form of late, whereas Crystal Palace, of course, have turned their form around completely and now just 2 points behind Bournemouth. Brighton in 8th on 47 points, but they themselves are winless in their last 3. Newcastle play against Leicester today. You'd expect them to win that and move them up to 53 points, of which they could then, of course, move above Aston Villa and above Manchester City, although Man City play Man United today. But Aston Villa are on 51 points, 31 games played in 6th. Man City on 51 points, 30 games played in 5th. They play Man United at Old Trafford at 4:30 today. Chelsea play also today. They are away at Brentford, 2:00 kickoff on 52 points. They have to win that game. If Chelsea lose this game or drop points in this game, it could have massive ramifications for their hopes of earning a Champions League spot. But Arsenal in 62 points, Nottingham Forest on 57. Nottingham Forest need to be careful. They are 5 points clear of Chelsea, but on 57 points. But, as we just talked about there, a bad run can really have a damaging impact on kind of the hopes of teams wanting to qualify for the Champions League next season. But title's done, gone. That's where kind of Arsenal are at. Right, part 2, and your thoughts in the chat box coming up right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of the show. We're going to be going into the chat box and tackling some of your thoughts as well. And very much looking forward, of course, to speaking with some of you as well. I'm looking forward, of course, to that game on Tuesday. It's kind of, I think, where people's heads are at. It felt like even our heads were on Madrid. Premier League's a really strange thing for us right now, and it does feel very much secondary to what's going on. And I have a concern, of course, that if, say, the Real Madrid games don't go particularly well, that these Premier League games could end up being affected. And I just hope that we don't have a bad kind of run in towards the end of the season. That would be really, 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 really bad. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Right. Andy says, I really feel like some of the kind of fan groups and YouTube channels have to come together to write a public letter addressing Collymore. Well, what's Collymore done now? I can't say I barely pay him any attention. Telwood Studio says, reminded me of the Tunisia-Mali game where the ref blew a whistle a couple of minutes early. Yeah, that's the meme going around yesterday for sure. Sowerton says they're trying so hard to tarnish Miles Lewis Skelly's image. His buddy tried once, and now, of course, him as well. Sadiq says Darren England referee was on VAR duty when Lewis Skelly got a red card for tripping Wolves. They're incompetent, protect each other, and also the media and football tribalism helps to avoid accountability. Maximus says, Tom, there should be a discussion on how we spilled our chances, especially in the second half. I mean, what can we say more than we haven't said already this season? I've pointed to it, and I'm glad that you're starting to see it as well. For me, the thing that is in our control the most this season as to why we have not got more points outside of the things that, as I say, are not within our means is been our finishing. Missed chances has been the biggest reason Arsenal have not got the points that I think they should get. The creativity of this team has created chances to score this season, and we would have far more goals. Like you look, we scored 90 goals last season. We have 56 this season with 7 games left. We are 34 goals off of our tally. Now, I know that, of course, the injuries have been a big part of that. No Saka, no Odegaard, no Martinelli, no Havertz, no Jesus. I know that's been a big part of why we've struggled to score. But still, I think that it's not that necessarily for a lack of creating chances. We've created chances. We just haven't scored as much as we should have done. And to think that you can get 34 goals in 7 games, I mean, that's what a goal on how many? If we do a quick 34 divided by 7. You need to score on average 4.8 goals per game to match last season's goal tally in the league. That's nuts, isn't it? The gap between this season and last season's goal output has been dramatic. Nick says, I noticed Berta was at the game, giving a good overview as well. Yeah, it's important that he's in and around the club as much as possible, in and around the games as much as possible to see what that we desperately need in the summer. Martin says, Tom, did you see that United have had to slash ticket prices for today's game because of a lack of interest for a Manchester derby? I didn't see that, Martin, but that's hilarious if true. Lai says, I know we're laughing at referees, but this is a more serious problem than we're crediting. I don't understand how there's such an abject lack of accountability from referees. It's been like this for years, Lai. And you're absolutely right. It is a more serious problem than we jest about here, but I'm just so tired, mate. I'm just so tired of talking about it. And maybe that's what they're banking on. Maybe they're banking on us getting so tired that we just accept it. Well, we'll always keep talking about it, but it is tiring. Ronald says, if we lose a defender, would Dean Huijsen be a great option? Oh, without a doubt, he's brilliant. But I think he'll probably end up at either a Liverpool or a Real Madrid, somebody like that, because I think Arsenal's defensive options, prevent us really from going big on another defender, sadly. Alex says, did you see the tweet from Mark Goldbridge about us being in double figures for drop points in poor refereeing? I did see it. I can't say I always agree with what Mark says and does, but he's got some decent views on Arsenal, to be fair, most of the time. Kirill says, I have to work Thursday night. My manager didn't allow me to trade shifts with a co-worker, and I'm disappointed. Or Thursday isn't a game that we're... Do you mean Tuesday? Oh, Tuesday. It looks like you mean Tuesday. You put a H in there. But yeah, that sucks. That does suck. That is awful. Mike says, I made an unpleasant read, hopefully fake, but that Arsenal were looking into Man United's Anthony. Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into that, mate. Andy says, Collymore is still the guy that can make the PGMOL dissolve and hire the referees directly. The refs are hardly going to do that by themselves. Am I getting confused with like a different Collymore? Like, I don't know if this is the right... Do you mean Howard Webb? I don't know who this is meant to be. I don't know who you're talking about. Kingsley says, do y'all mind giving Liverpool a guard of honour? I do. I'd love for Arsenal to draw the next Premier League game. I'd rather not give Liverpool a guard of honour. I think it's our choice about whether or not we have to. I'd rather not. We probably will. We've done it before. We did it during COVID when they won the league. So, but I'd rather not have to do that. Orange Juice says, I know he's a rival, but I never ever. But do you ever feel sad when a generational player like KDB leaves the league? Yeah, of course. I've got a lot of appreciation for Kevin De Bruyne as a footballer. But I'm glad he's leaving City. I'm glad that is not going to be a player they can call upon for the foreseeable. Ronald says, thoughts on Gyökeres tending to drift left and even right over down the middle. Is that a concern? Ronald's been watching some of Tifo's work on Gyökeres. I think that there is too much attention paid sometimes on what players do for the clubs they play for now and their specific systems. They're going to be playing different roles when they join the club. They're going to be doing different jobs. I look at kind of the macro stuff rather than the micro stuff. I'm looking at his finishing. He's a very good finisher. Get him in the box, get him in really good shooting opportunities, and he's lethal. So that's kind of what I'm looking at with Gyökeres if he was to be signed. And I look at that with Sesko as well. Sesko's finishing is also very good. So I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at kind of those elements of his game before I considered thinking about what I consider him. His non-penalty XG 16.4 this season. Sorry, his non-penalty XG 16.4. Why don't we have the numbers for that? Is it because he's in the Portuguese league? We don't have those numbers. That's really irritating. I'd love to know what his XG, his non-penalty XG was this season. So if he's outperforming that non-penalty XG, maybe someone can give it to us. Because he's playing Portugal, the Opta stats don't have that, which is annoying. Do we have an international level? Because he's got a good record for his national team. XG. Do we have? No, don't have XG there either. That's annoying. Sorry, I don't have the numbers. Rich says, what did you make of the Cannon podcast? Fairly underwhelming take on. I think we talked about it, Rich, the other day. Invincible says, Tom, we were creative last season. This year that has changed. We're not as creative as we were. So unless that changes, a new striker will not make a massive difference. I disagree. I think we have created plenty of chances this season, and our clinical finishing has been our bigger problem. I think we've created plenty. I mean, just look at yesterday. We're talking about chances that we didn't take. Merino, Martinelli, Trossard, Sterling, Ødegaard, all had really good chances yesterday. Ødegaard from the cutback from Tierney, Sterling from the cutback from White, Marino's header at the end of the game that went over the bar, Timber's header that went over the bar, Martinelli's shot from inside the box, Trossard's heavy touch, and Trossard's kind of stab at Pickford. That as well. We created plenty of chances yesterday, and that's the story of our season. So I think for me, that's the crux of the campaign. We're still creating. We're just not finishing chances that we do create. So Nicholas says, the refs are what are burning me out, because even with the missed chances and injuries, when you look at the table and consider the refs have cost us between 6 and 8 points, it's just like, what are we even doing? Yeah, I agree with you, mate. Gaz says, TNT's commentator's take on the penalty was also sad. That is the benefit, I guess, of being in the ground, is that you don't always have to listen to some of the bad takes that you get through your interwaves. And it says, sorry, my bad. I'm talking about Richard Masters, not Collymore. I don't know why Collymore was coming into mind. I thought indeed it was someone else you mentioned, but Howard Webb, of course, head of the PGMOL, Richard Masters, head of the Premier League. Maximus says, Tom, I feel Howard Webb's era has been the worst of the PGMOL, and that's saying a lot considering how bad the refs have been ever since that we've been watching football. What a legacy to retire with. Jasper says, why was Tarkowski's tackle on Trossard not a penalty? He clearly stopped him from a one-on-one with a crazy sliding tackle, because Trossard kind of rode the challenge. I think if Trossard went down, like Harrison kind of buys that penalty. It's never a pen, but there's far more indication for Trossard to go down. I think Trossard needs to be a bit smarter there, and it's a bad, slide from Tarkowski. He needs to be a little bit more savvy and probably use that to his advantage, because it was a bad tackle, but Trossard kind of rides it and goes over it, trying to keep, his composure on the ball. But I think probably a smarter player probably uses that bad tackle from Tarkowski to win a penalty. Walter says, good morning, Tom. Why is there such a reluctance from media to even entertain the possibility of corruption when it comes to refs? Corruption always follows money, and there's a lot of that in football. I think because obviously legal reasons, Walter. If you make accusations and use words like that, you have got to come with evidence. And the only evidence that we've got of bias or what's the right word, kind of preferential treatment, we only have what we see. We only have what we see as kind of the results of those. Now, I think Arsenal have a reputation. I think there's unconscious biases. People go further than that and use words like corruption. I haven't used that personally, because you need to have a lot of evidence when you start talking about words as serious as that. So it's legal reasons why people don't in the media perhaps go that far. So yeah, that's hopefully explains the answer to your question. Lynn says, Tom watched Valencia against Real Madrid, and Real Madrid weren't good as I have seen them. Mbappe was not clinical. Real Madrid are flawed. You know, they aren't perfect. They have their issues. They're probably going to have Courtois in goal on Tuesday. I'll probably back for that game, which sucks, but it is what it is. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to expect on Tuesday. It's a complete mystery to me, I think, what's going to go down, what could happen. I'm really excited for it. It's a great spectacle to be able to witness, but I really don't know what to expect. Real Madrid have got their flaws. We certainly have our flaws. We don't know who's going to be fully fit. We don't know who's going to be fully fit for either team. We don't know who's going to really play. We don't know how the game's going to play out. We don't know how they're going to approach the match, but Real Madrid are flawed. And I think if they were, I was literally about to say this, Damien just wrote, Real Madrid fans would have watched us yesterday and probably thought the same thing, which is very true. But yeah, they'd lost yesterday to Valencia. They missed a lot of chances. They were punished by Valencia, but that's, you know, we lack speed, I think, on the transition. And I think we need to hope that Martinelli and Saka can provide some of that pace that we've maybe been missing, because on the transition, we can catch them out, as they were caught out yesterday by Valencia. So let's hope that we can take that into Tuesday night's game. But defensively, I have got concerns, rather large concerns about our game. Martin says there's a bias against us because Arteta had the nerve to call out refereeing last season, and he's getting payback for it. And he says, not like players like Paqueta, Tony, and Tonali. Of course, people would never ever do that so smartly about leaving breadcrumbs. Love Me Forever says, my two favourite teams. I always wish to play each other to tell you that they're going to be up for it. I'm hoping it's going to be a great game. Liam says, hi, Tom. If Saliba clash of heads against Brighton is a penalty, then shouldn't Marino have won a penalty when Tarkowski clashed with his head? There are differences between the two actions. I don't think either is a penalty, but I absolutely understand why you've asked the question. So yeah, I see why you've asked that. We're going to round a show off there. I don't really have the energy to talk more about yesterday's game. I don't really know what much more we can talk about. We can bemoan referees. We can be worried about our clinical finishing. We can... or we can move on with our Sundays and enjoy the sunshine. Thank you so much, as always, for listening and tuning in. I'm going to go play the first round of golf I've ever played in about 6 months, so wish me luck. It's going to be dreadful, but it's a round of golf and I haven't played in ages, so I'm looking forward to that. Tomorrow, of course, is Mikel Arteta's Real Madrid press conference. It's also the open training session. I'm going to be at both. I'm actually going to the Arsenal youth game tomorrow evening as well, which I'm looking forward to. It's my first time ever watching kind of a youth game in the flesh, which is I'm excited for. Arsenal's under 21s are taking on Derby. I don't think Max Dowman will be involved. Doesn't tend to play for the under 21s at the moment, but maybe he'll be there. We will wait and see. But yeah, I've got a lot of football in 4 days. Liverpool up yesterday. Tomorrow, youth game. Tuesday, Real Madrid. So hectic, very busy, but I'm looking forward to it all. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Really appreciate your time, as always. Have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day. Enjoy yourselves. Stay safe. Stay well. Stay happy and respectful. Enjoy the sunshine. And as always, up the Arsenal.